the storm.
Chapter 1. The Boundaries of a Duty.
The restless sound of the crashing waves seeped through the cracks of the wooden windows, filling the room with a damp, sharp scent of the sea. Marcus adjusted the parchment map on his desk, tracing his fingers along its frayed, yellowed edges. Serving as the port governor for 20 long years had taught him one absolute truth: the sea never listens. It accepts no bribes, and it obeys no royal decrees. Yet, keeping the harbor lighthouse burning, checking the mooring ropes every morning, and warning the town of an approaching storm were entirely within his domain. Marcus always maintained his mind right on this sharp, dividing line. Outside, the sky turned a leaden, almost pitch-black hue, and the door rattled violently as someone pounded on it. Lucas, his young assistant, rushed in completely out of breath. Water dripped from his heavy cloak, and the sheer panic in his eyes seemed more dangerous than the swelling waves outside. The young man's frantic energy instantly shattered the calm, philosophical atmosphere of the room. "Sir, the great merchant fleet from the south is drifting right toward the jagged rocks," Lucas cried out, his voice trembling. "The storm broke out much faster than we anticipated. If those ships crash against the reef, they will sink. The entire winter food supply of the city, all our flour, all our wheat, will be swallowed by the sea. We must do something. We must stop the waves and force those ships to change their course." Marcus rose calmly from his chair. He looked at Lucas's shaking hands and his wide, desperate eyes. His steps were slow, deliberate, and grounded. When he placed his hand on the young man's shoulder, his warmth and unshakable presence slowed Lucas's racing heart. Marcus's voice carried a profound stillness that seemed to cut right through the howling gale outside. "We cannot stop the waves of the sea, Lucas. We cannot alter the direction of the wind. And we cannot appease the wrath of the sky." Lucas looked at the governor's face with a mixture of confusion and growing frustration. "So we just stand here with our hands tied. We just watch a whole fleet sink and let our people starve this winter. Is your great wisdom nothing more than bowing down to helplessness?" Marcus smiled faintly. As he pulled his thick, heavy cloak over his shoulders, he answered the young man's question with a deep, steady breath. "No, Lucas, we do not bow to helplessness. We simply focus entirely on what is actually ours to do. We will stoke the fire of the lighthouse, we will prepare the rescue boats, and we will reinforce the mooring lines on the shore. We cannot govern the storm, but how we respond to the storm is entirely up to us. Now, clear your mind and follow me to the harbor."
Chapter 2. The Choice Amidst the Waves.
When they stepped onto the harbor wharf, the wind whipped against their faces like a lash, and salty spray stung their eyes. The sea was foaming like an untamable wild beast, and monstrous waves battered the stone pier, shaking the ground beneath them. Out in the darkness and churning foam, the silhouettes of 3 massive merchant ships appeared and vanished fitfully. Lucas barked orders left and right in sheer desperation, shouting conflicting commands at the soldiers. "Run over there. No, wait, the ships are drifting east. Get to the eastern pier immediately. Block the waves. Stop the ship from hitting the shore." The soldiers, consumed by chaos and fear, collided with one another. Meanwhile, Marcus stood dead center on the wharf, rooted like an ancient oak tree. He closed his eyes for a single moment, leaving the external apocalypse behind him. He retreated into the unyielding fortress of his own mind. He reflected on the mental clarity, the prudence that the Stoic sages always spoke of, that razor-sharp boundary between the desire to control fate and the power to govern one's own will. In his mind, he divided the universe into two distinct compartments. First, he looked at the external world, the things completely outside his control. The ferocity and direction of the wind were entirely different to his will, just like the sheer size of the crashing waves, or whether the wooden hulls of the ships could withstand the immense pressure. Even the depth of the sea and the exact location of the hidden reefs were absolute, unchangeable realities. Fixating on these things would only exhaust his mind and breed despair. Immediately after, he shifted his focus inward to the only realm he actually commanded. He could not stop the wind, but he could maximize the brightness of the lighthouse flame. He could not alter the structural integrity of the ships, but he could flawlessly organize the rescue crews on the shore. And he could not change the depth of the sea, but the will he displayed against the paralyzing fear inside him was entirely his own to determine. When Marcus opened his eyes, neither the terrifying howl of the wind nor the staggering size of the waves could move him. He no longer saw the chaos around him, he saw only his own agency. He called Lucas over, his voice cutting through the tempest with absolute precision. "Lucas, take half the men to the lighthouse tower immediately. Dry the wood, supply the pitch. The light must not dim for even a second. It is the sailor's only guide. Take the other half and ready the heavy mooring lines on the pier. When those ships draw near, we will have exactly one right moment to throw the ropes. We will not miss it. Stop fighting the storm, Lucas, and focus on the lighthouse." Seeing the governor's complete mental shift, Lucas broke free from his own panic. Marcus's clarity became his anchor. The young man stopped weeping, stopped shouting at the wind, and ran to execute the orders with precise focus.
Chapter 3: The Unshakable Citadel.
The storm raged with full ferocity until dawn. Throughout the night, the sky seemed to split open as lightning illuminated the harbor. The first ship narrowly avoided the rocks. Thanks to the bright, piercing beam of the lighthouse cutting through the gale, the sailors spotted the narrow, sheltered mouth of the harbor and sailed to safety. The second ship, however, was not so fortunate. With a sickening crunch, it capsized a few hundred meters off the pier. As the waves repeatedly battered the vessel, its wooden hull splintered open, and tons of wheat and food sacks vanished into the dark waters within seconds. The crew threw themselves into the freezing sea, fighting for their lives. Lucas collapsed to his knees at the horrific sight, covering his face with his hands. Everything is ruined. All the winter food is gone. Months of hard work, the livelihood of our people, wiped out in a single night. We are finished. Marcus did not hesitate for a second. He pulled up the trembling soldiers whose knees had buckled, physically helping his men untee the rusted chains of the rescue boats. He walked over to Lucas, grabbed him by the cloak, pulled him to his feet, and spoke firmly. "The sinking of the grain or the destruction of the ship is not our fault, Lucas. We are not the gods who write the laws of nature. We are not the laws of physics that keep cargo afloat. Our domain, our duty right now is to pull those men out of the water. The tears you shed for the grain are actively stopping you from holding the rope that could save a drowning sailor. Stand up and stop fighting the storm." fight for the rope in front of you. The young man drew immense strength from Marcus's unshakable posture, a posture that refused to lose its heading even when everything else drifted. Lucas wiped his eyes, ignored the blood blistering on his palms, and pulled the ropes with all his might. Under the governor's leadership, the soldiers launched rescue boats into the violently churning waves. When the sun finally peeked through the scattering leaden clouds, the harbor fell quiet at last. The toll was heavy. 2 of the 3 ships had made it to safety, and hundreds of sailors had been saved from a watery grave. Yet, more than half of the city's winter wheat rested at the bottom of the sea. Nothing remained but wet splinters of wood and exhausted, shivering bodies.
Chapter 4: The Morning of Wisdom.
The next morning, a heavy, somber silence hung over the market square. Distraught merchants, bakers, and families began gathering outside Marcus's study, their voices rising in a mixture of anxiety and anger over the lost supplies. Inside, Lucas paced back and forth, biting his nails as he peered through the window at the growing crowd. "Sir, there are hundreds of people out there. They are going to blame us. They are terrified of starving this winter, and they have every right to be. How are we going to calm this anger? What can we possibly say to them? They won't even listen." Marcus sat quietly at his desk, sipping his morning herbal tea. There was no trace of fear on his face, nor any sign of shame. He looked at Lucas's anxious, twisting expressions and set his cup down slowly. "Lucas, last night in the midst of the sea, we made a choice. Do you remember what would have happened if we had tried to stop the storm, or if we had spent our energy shouting commands at the wind? We would have been swept away by the gale, sir. We would have achieved nothing and destroyed ourselves. And what did we choose to do instead? We chose to do what was in our power. We chose to keep the lighthouse burning, we chose to launch the rescue boats, and we saved lives. That, Lucas, is exactly what mental wisdom is. The anger and fear of the crowd out there right now are no different from last night's tempest. We cannot directly control their minds, their feelings, their internal panic, or their resentment toward us. That is their domain. Our domain is to tell them the truth honestly, to build a fair system to ration the remaining grain, and to seek new trade routes from neighboring cities. If we have done our duty to the absolute best of our ability, the rest is not our burden to carry." Marcus opened the heavy wooden door of his study and stepped outside. He walked directly to the front of the noisy, restless crowd in the square. He did not offer desperate excuses, nor did he curse bad luck or nature. He simply told the truth with absolute honesty. He explained the sheer power of the storm, how they had fought through the night, the lives they had saved, and he presented the precise rationing plan he had already drawn up to get them through the winter. His composed, dignified presence, entirely free of guilt yet fully assuming responsibility, instantly diffused the crowd's rising anger. The people knew the port governor could not command the weather, but they saw that he had performed his actual duty with the highest virtue, keeping his mind clear through the worst of the chaos. Standing in a corner of the square that morning, Lucas realized he had witnessed the greatest philosophical lesson put into practice. To keep from drowning in the noise, chaos, and unpredictable disasters of the world, a person must first draw the boundaries of their own mind and tend only to the garden they actually have the power to cultivate.